Greenland, data centers, renewable energy. You know, when I first saw this combo in your research request, I gotta admit, I thought, oh, okay, has someone been reading too much sci-fi? But uh, the more I dug in, the more this whole thing really caught my attention.
Yeah, it does grab you, doesn't it? I mean, the Arctic isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind when you think tech hub, right? But I think that's what makes it so fascinating to unpack.
Absolutely. We could be talking about a total shift in how we think about where these massive data centers are located and why. So for our listeners who haven't encountered this yet, let's start with the basics. What's got the tech world so interested in Greenland in the first place?
In a word, potential. Picture this. A single glacier in Greenland, just one, could potentially generate enough hydropower to power all the homes in a city the size of San Francisco.
Wow. Okay, now that's a statistic that gets my attention. I knew Greenland had hydropower resources, but that kind of scale, that's something else.
Oh, it's massive. And we're not talking about just one-off projects here. This is about consistent renewable energy on a scale that's pretty mind-boggling. Yeah. Combine that hydropower with Greenland's crazy, strong winds, perfect for wind farms, by the way, and suddenly you're looking at a very real possibility of 100% renewable energy for these data-hungry giants.
Which is huge, right? I mean, let's be real. These data centers use a crazy amount of energy. It's like they're constantly hungry for more. But even beyond the renewable energy aspect, there's something else about Greenland that's really interesting. Natural cooling. Didn't see that one coming.
Right. Cooling is a massive expense for most data centers. You're basically waging a war against all that heat generated by the processing power. But in Greenland, you've got this incredible built-in year-round cooling system, courtesy of Mother Nature herself. The Arctic climate, something they have in spades, becomes a major asset, potentially slashing operating costs and shrinking that carbon footprint.
So, just to sum up what we've got, we're talking about a place with off-the-charts renewable energy potential and natural cooling. I mean, talk about a win-win situation for both the tech world and the environment, right?
Absolutely.
But, and this is a big but, building anything in Greenland, let alone something on this scale, that's not going to be a walk in the park.
You can say that again. Building anything in the Arctic. It's challenging, to say the least. The environment is as unforgiving as it is beautiful.
Okay, so we've got this picture of Greenland with like almost unlimited clean energy and built-in AC, which sounds amazing, right? But there's that other side to the story, the one we can't ignore, the realities of actually building anything in the Arctic.
Right. It's not as simple as, just dropping a data center anywhere you find a patch of ice.
Not at all. So let's talk about some of those challenges, because there are some big ones. What's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Well, data connectivity, that's a big one. It's not something most people think about, but it's the backbone of the entire internet. And right now, Greenland relies on a single submarine cable for most of its data connection. One cable for the whole country.
Hold on. Seriously. One cable. That seems, I don't know, kind of risky, to say the least.
It is, especially when you're talking about data centers that need to handle massive amounts of information constantly. And it's not like you can just string up some extra cables overnight.
Right. It's not like calling your internet provider and saying, hey, can you bump up my speed? We're talking about some serious infrastructure upgrades here.
Exactly. Upgrading that infrastructure in the Arctic, it's complex and expensive. Think new submarine cables, terrestrial networks that can handle those conditions. A whole other level of logistics.
And then there's the whole aspect of, actually building anything in Greenland. It's not like there's a Home Depot on every corner.
That's putting it mildly. Think about it. Every single thing, the materials, the tools, even the people, everything has to be brought in from somewhere else.
It's like building a small city on the moon, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. And then you have the human element to consider. Greenland has a relatively small population, which means finding skilled workers to not just build, but also operate these complex data centers, well, it's another challenge to add to the list.
So not only do you have to build it, you've got to staff it, and not just with anyone, but with people who really know their stuff, and convince them to live, basically in the Arctic.
It's a big ask, for sure. And it's not just about the people either. You have to factor in the environment itself. We've talked about the advantages, but building anything in the Arctic has an impact.
Yeah, we can't just gloss over that. Greenland is beautiful and pristine for a reason, and I'm guessing they're not just going to let anyone come in and start digging things up without some serious consideration.
Exactly. They're very protective of their environment, and rightfully so. So there are strict environmental regulations in place that have to be followed to the letter, and for good reason. Building hydropower plants, which is a big part of this whole green energy picture, often means building dams. And dams, they can have a pretty big impact on the ecosystem.
So it's like this constant balancing act trying to harness the power of nature without, messing it up in the process. Which makes me wonder, how does Greenland approach this? Are they all gung-ho about development, or are they more cautious?
I'd say they're definitely on the cautious side, which from an environmental perspective is a good thing.
Right, it's their home. So it makes sense that they're going to be careful about who they let in and what they allow to be built. So we've gone deep on this whole Greenland thing, right? We've seen the amazing potential, the clean energy, that natural cooling. It's pretty impressive stuff. But then there's the flip side, the reality of the Arctic, the challenges, the costs, all those hurdles we talked about. So where do you land on this? Is Greenland really going to become this data center haven, or is it, just a cool idea that's not really practical?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think what makes it so interesting is that there's no easy answer, no clear yes or no. There's just so much to consider.
Right, it's not a simple equation.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. What are the strongest arguments in favor of Greenland becoming this data center hub?
Well, the potential is huge. There's no denying that. I mean, we're talking about the possibility of powering data centers. And these things use a ton of energy, entirely on renewables. That's a game changer, not just for the tech industry, but for the planet as a whole. And we can't forget about the stability Greenland offers, being part of Denmark. That means something in terms of long-term investments, and companies, they like that.
Yeah, stability and sustainability, those are two big boxes to check for sure. But then there's the other side of it, the logistics, the infrastructure, building in the Arctic. That's a whole different ballgame.
It is, and that's really the heart of the issue. You could have all the green energy in the world, but if you can't get the data where it needs to go, and I mean quickly and reliably, it doesn't really matter. And like we talked about, that whole connectivity situation in Greenland, that's a big one to solve. New cables, new networks, it all adds up.
So it sounds like it really comes down to this trade-off. Incredible potential versus some very real and very costly obstacles.
It does. And I think for some companies, especially those who maybe can't afford to wait, places like Iceland, they just make more sense right now. They've got a head start. The infrastructure is there. They're closer to everything. It's more straightforward.
But for those who are willing to, I don't know, maybe take a bit more of a gamble, those with a longer-term vision, Greenland could be incredibly appealing.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being the company that figures this out, the one that cracks the code on building and operating in the Arctic. The potential is huge, not just in terms of the data itself, but from a leadership standpoint. It's a chance to do something really groundbreaking.
It's kind of inspiring in a way, isn't it? This idea that we might find solutions to some of our biggest tech challenges in most unexpected places. It really makes you wonder, what other Greenlands are out there just waiting to be discovered? What seemingly impossible idea today might become the next big thing tomorrow? It's something to think about, that's for sure. And on that note, thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time for another exploration into the ever-evolving world of tech.